half a century, the world's largest nation has been communist. Chairman Mao Zedong created the People's Republic in 1949, and since then, tensions between China and the West have remained volatile. But despite the strain between the West and Red China, there once was a time when some in America saw Mao Zedong as a natural ally. When World War II broke out, nationalist Chinese forces under Chiang Kai-shek received the goodwill and financial support of the Allies. But a secret mission of American operatives formed a partnership with the Communist Army of Mao Zedong. One of the great ironies of the war is that the United States unwittingly played a role in China's conversion to communism. For 20 years, two men dueled for the future of China. Mao Zedong led a battle-hardened band of guerrillas fighting to create a communist China. China's nationalist army was led by Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek, whose name in the Mandarin dialect is pronounced Zhong Kai-she. By 1936, the civil war between the nationalists and the communists in China had been raging for nearly 10 years.
Mao and Chiang Kai-shek clearly had a visceral hatred for each other. It was often forgotten, and Mao never publicly discussed it very much, but his second wife, I believe it was killed by Chiang's troops in 1927. Chiang also saw the communists as the single greatest threat to his vision of a united China under his rule. And I think over time, Mao and Chiang did see each other as symbols of what the other hated most and resented most.
But in 1936, China's decade-long civil war was being upstaged by a new threat: Japan. The Japanese invasion of Manchuria in 1931 might well be considered the first act of the Second World War. 8 years before war broke out in Europe. Manchurian armies fled into China. China's border provinces soon became targets of Japanese expansion. Weakened by civil war, China was ripe for invasion by Japan. Many Chinese felt there was only one hope: a united front. If the battling armies of Mao's communists and Chiang's nationalists could fight as one, they might repel the invasion. The only difficulty was that Chiang Kai-shek believed the internal threat to China from Mao was a greater problem than the outside threat from Japan.
I suppose the best way to characterize how Chiang and Mao saw each other was an aphorism that Chiang once said. He said, "The Japanese and other foreigners are a disease of the skin. The communists are a disease of the heart." They were the ones that really threatened, as he put it, China, meaning him and his rule of China.
Thus the stage was set for one of the most bizarre acts of spycraft and subterfuge in the storied history of World War II. A hostage crisis that would unite the bitter enemies dueling over China's future. As the Japanese threatened to move into northern China in 1936, Chiang preferred to focus his armies on his final extermination campaign against the communists. He ordered the army of General Zhang Zhuliang, known as the Young Marshal, to surround Mao's stronghold in the city of Yan'an and lead an assault. Instead, the Young Marshal quietly contacted the Communist Party headquarters in the ancient city of Xi'an. Xi'an, in the center of China, was the capital for the ancient Chinese dynasties 2 centuries before Christ. The first emperor of China built his palace and his tomb there. it was a fitting place for the creation of a new China. Marshal Jiang was a Manchurian. He wanted revenge on the Japanese invader, and it was clear he was not going to get it from Chiang. He had to force Chiang's hand. Unaware of the secret meetings between the Marshal and the Communists, Chiang Kai-shek impatiently headed to Xi'an to personally lead the young Marshal's troops against Mao. Upon arrival in Xi'an, the hunter became the hunted. The young Marshal placed Chiang under house arrest and sent word to Mao. His enemy was now detained. Hurried conferences of communist leaders debated whether to jail Chiang, exile him, or execute him. But Mao Zedong agreed with the young Marshal. The real threat to China was not the long civil war, but the invading Japanese. Changing 10 years of communist policy, Mao then offered to join hands with his mortal enemy. The offer to Chiang Kai-shek was simple: renounce his attempts to destroy the communists and agree to combine forces as allies against their joint enemy, Japan. In truth, Chiang had little choice in the matter. Chiang Kai-shek returned to his capital in Nanking, proclaiming the deal a triumph rather than a humiliating defeat. The war for the future of China was put on hold for the time being. The new alliance came none too soon. Within 6 months, Japan was poised to invade China itself. The Japanese turned their sights on Shanghai. Then, as now, it was the financial heart of China. A coastal city built by Westerners. An international metropolis once called the Paris of Asia. It was Shanghai that the Japanese attacked in 1937.
The Great Battle of Shanghai was fought between August 13th, 1937, and it ended November 25th. It was a horrible battle. In that period of really only about 3 months, the Nationalists lost about 300,000 men. They lost eventually because the Japanese were able to outflank them and make a landing at Hangzhou Bay to the south and come around and cut them off.
From Shanghai, the invaders rapidly made their way to the capital. Japanese troops began a rampage of atrocities that has come to be known as the Rape of Nanking. In a 3-month period, the Japanese army killed over 200,000 civilians, raped an estimated 20,000 women, and then burned the city. In the north, Japanese troops invaded the provinces of Jehol and Shanxi. Here they met a combined Chinese force of nationalist and communist troops. In Pingqingguan, nationalist troops pretended to flee before the invaders, leading them into a high mountain pass and a trap. Communist guerrillas, trained in mountain fighting, descended upon the Japanese, wiping them out. The Battle of Pingqingguan was an enormous victory for China's new united front. But it would be their last. Japan rapidly conquered the coastal cities and manufacturing centers. Chinese troops, primarily trained in techniques of civil war, were poorly armed and poorly fed. They were no match for the disciplined, well-equipped armies of the Rising Sun. By the end of 1937, Japan considered China a conquered nation. But in the rural West, Chiang Kai-shek still proclaimed himself Generalissimo of Free China. And in the mountainous Northwest, Mao Zedong's communist stronghold remained unconquered. Now it was time for a different kind of war. A war of guerrillas. A war of spies. Japan invaded China in the summer of 1937, and by year's end had occupied the major cities of China's east coast. Shanghai, Peking, and Canton all had fallen. But one corner of Shanghai had actually remained untouched. Here in this most western of Asian cities, the United States and European countries had settlements with the status of colonies, settlements that the Japanese dared not touch. From 1937 to 1941, this European section of the city called itself Island Shanghai, a neutral sanctuary in a sea of Japanese occupation. Island Shanghai soon became a home for spies.
Shanghai was a perfect place for a city of intrigue to be located in because it really was 4 different cities. The city was divided into an international settlement, which was essentially run by the British, a French concession, a Japanese section, and then the Chinese portion of the city. Someone could commit a crime or carry out an assassination raid in one part of the city, step across the boundary into the international settlement, and instantly find asylum there. It was almost as though you were living on the border of 4 different countries.
The Peace Hotel, still standing today, became Spy Central in the late 1930s. In its grand ballroom, the communist underground watched Japanese operatives while nationalist secret police tailed British spies who were snooping on German agents. In the bars of Western hotels and in the back alleys of Chinese slums, deals were struck, assassinations were planned, and treachery was unmasked.
You know, one of the hardest things to piece out, if you look at this period carefully, is who was working for whom. People changed sides. That was recognized. I've interviewed people in China who had worked for one side or the other. It made Vienna or Berlin look like child's play.
Far to the northwest of Shanghai were the headquarters for the spies of the communists. Yunnan was quite a contrast from the debauched pleasures of Shanghai. Mao and his followers lived in caves dug out of sandstone mountains. His soldiers were mostly peasants. They followed a Spartan egalitarian regimen, a peasant lifestyle for a peasant regime. Traditional military strategy was futile against the much better equipped and more powerful Japanese army. So Mao Zedong turned to guerrilla warfare, with surprising results.
Mao was an avid reader of the Chinese classics, many of whom featured these Robin Hood figures from the Ming Dynasty, or going way back, that employed these tactics. You lure the enemy to penetrate into your base and then you spring on him.
Mao's Bible for guerrilla warfare was a 2,500-year-old book, Sun Tzu's classic, The Art of War. This ancient guide to military tactics is still used today by corporate strategists and military leaders. Sun Tzu said, "The best military force has no constant formation, as water has no constant shape. The ability to gain victory by changing and adapting according to the opponent is called genius." In his own textbook of guerrilla warfare, written after reading Sun Tzu, Mao remarked, "The army lives among the peasants like the fish in the sea." Echoing the art of war, Mao said, "Fluidity of battle lines leads to fluidity in the size of our base areas. Our base areas are constantly expanding and contracting. As often as one base falls, another arises. Fluidity of territory is entirely the result of the fluidity of the war." Mao's guerrillas attacked Japanese railroad tracks, disrupted troop movements, blew up arms caches and ammunition dumps, then disappeared into the surrounding villages. When Chinese peasants were conscripted by force into the Japanese occupation army, Mao's guerrillas did a brisk business buying their Japanese-supplied guns and ammunition. To the peasants of the northern provinces, Mao's guerrillas were truly the Robin Hoods of China. But Mao Zedong had additional support in his campaign of secret warfare. This was an espionage training camp created and funded by the Soviet Union. Based in Mao's headquarters in Yan'an, it was called the Institute of Oriental Munich.
The Institute of Oriental Munich was controlled by the Soviets. It trained hundreds of agents for Asian Communist parties, and not include how to use secret ink, how to penetrate into enemy's tent, for example, and how to use codes. And those special skills were needed for any agents.
A time came when Mao's spies could return the favor. Mao soon had trained spies in various places throughout China and even in Europe. In May 1941, one of Mao's agents met a German military attaché at an embassy party. The German proudly bragged to his new Chinese friend that Hitler was about to turn the tables on Stalin and invade Russia. The Chinese agent excused himself and immediately radioed headquarters. Shocked by the news and pleased by his far-reaching spy network, Mao contacted Stalin.
Stalin wouldn't believe it. Stalin thought this is Oriental garbage and some kind of conspiratorial scheme. And of course, when Barbarossa started in June 22nd, 1941, Stalin realized he had been mistaken.
Mao's spies had stumbled onto one of the biggest secrets of World War II, but they simply were not believed because they were Chinese. Meanwhile, both Chiang and Mao found it mutually beneficial to begin spying not just on the Japanese, but on each other as well. The head of Chiang's intelligence network was an elusive figure whose brutal reputation still elicits fear in China today. His name was Dai Li, a major general in Chiang's Kuomintang party. He headed an organization with the innocuous name of Bureau of Statistics and Investigation.
Dai Li's intelligence force was at the time the largest in the world. The estimates of the number of assets or agents ranged from 100,000 to 300,000 agents. He had agents throughout China, in Japan, throughout Southeast Asia, in the South Pacific, and even in America.
He was a brilliant man, he was a tough-minded general, but he was a cutthroat. Precisely because of the image of being a cutthroat, efficient military chief, he attracted both admirations as well as hostility. He was ultra loyal to Chiang Kai-shek, so he hated the communists, and the communists of course hated him.
Interestingly enough, Dai Li's crack agents ran up against the same prejudice that Mao's spies had earlier. Despite their proven ability, their own allies did not take them seriously.
The cryptoanalysts that worked for Dai Li managed to crack the Japanese military codes and twice provided the United States with advance warning of the Pearl Harbor attack. warning that was ignored by the War Department, partly on the supposition that the Chinese couldn't possibly have carried out this cryptoanalytic feat.
The situation in China was about to change. The Japanese, unable to wipe out the resistance in China, turned their sights on the Pacific. Despite the warnings of Dai Li's codebreakers, the Americans were not prepared when Japan attacked the naval fleet at Pearl Harbor. A new player was about to enter the already confused field of wartime China. And Mao Zedong was about to acquire his strangest ally. The Japanese sneak attack on Pearl Harbor brought the United States into World War II. But Pearl Harbor had immense ramifications for China as well.
I ask that the Congress declare a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
China had now become America's partner in the war. Despite China's united front with Mao's communists, the United States only recognized the government of Chiang Kai-shek. The Americans began a massive campaign to support Chiang Kai-shek's nationalists, not only with troops, but with money, equipment, and arms as well.
The Americans rapidly concluded that every Japanese soldier tied down fighting in China was a Japanese soldier who wouldn't be fighting in the Philippines or Hawaii or in San Diego. So the American priority was keeping China in the war. Everyone recognized its efficiency was low, its success rate minimal, but as long as China stayed in the war, it tied down Japan.
The Japanese controlled all of the Western Pacific, preventing any aid to China by sea. So the Allies came the other way, sending supplies to India, which were then flown 500 miles over the Himalayas on a brutal mission known as Flying the Hump. In exchange for arms and equipment, the United States needed one thing from China: information. China was to become America's listening post. With this in mind, U.S. naval intelligence contacted the most knowledgeable man in Asia, the nationalist spymaster Dai Li. Lieutenant Commander Milton Miles of the U.S. Navy became the point man in a joint operation with the nationalist intelligence men called Naval Group China. This once classified film, shot by U.S. intelligence operatives, is one of the few times the elusive Dai Li allowed himself to be filmed.
The Special Forces trained by Naval Group China in 1942-43 in cooperation with Dai Li were designed to achieve several goals. Some were to be guerrillas in demolition, blow up bridges, blow up tunnels, harass the Japanese. Some were to be weather groups to set up weather tracking stations in North China and Manchuria. Other groups were designed to root out Japanese collaborators in unoccupied China.
Their espionage methods ranged from the highly technical, like code breaking, to the most simple, such as the use of carrier pigeons for covert long-distance communication. Commander Miles set up headquarters on a hill overlooking Chiang Kai-shek's capital of Chongqing. Though many Americans felt the real war was in Europe, Lieutenant Commander Miles saw China as the ideal place for his military career.
Miles saw this, like many other people, as his stake. That if he could develop a relationship with Dai Li and Chiang Kai-shek, it would be a personal fiefdom for himself, as well as give the U.S. Navy operational opportunities in China.
Dai Li and the Chinese nationalists had their own ulterior motives in the exchange.
Chinese nationalist leadership, especially Jiang and Dai Li, saw Naval Group China as a sort of backdoor to Washington, a way to curry influence, a way to get supplies, and a way to run around groups they didn't like.
But soon another group of spies would enter the picture. General William Wild Bill Donovan had just created the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, a forerunner of the CIA. Its creation in 1941 was controversial. U.S. Army and Navy intelligence resented yet another spy agency meddling in military matters, especially with a civilian at the helm. Though the OSS had many successful operations in the European theater, it was also in Europe that Donovan faced the most resistance from rival Allied intelligence groups. Donovan looked for an arena where he could operate without interference. He thought he'd found it in China.
Donovan wanted one thing in the China theater more than anything else: the independence with which he could operate his intelligence operations. And that potential of being independent from the Army control, from the Chinese control, really was most delicious to him. And he spent a lot of energy and time, resources in the China theater.
Donovan loosely allied his organization with the Chinese-American Joint Operation. The OSS brought experience and resources to China that Milton Miles' naval intelligence did not have.
The morale operation, fake rumors, make up stories, and they print fake documents to destabilize enemies' will to fight. For example, they will say the emperor had criticized the occupation forces in China for their atrocities, which of course is a fake story. And they even made up stories say General Tojo and Hitler have some kind of homosexual relationships.
The arrival of Donovan and the OSS alarmed many of the Americans in China. Milton Miles, now a captain, saw Donovan as encroaching on his turf. Donovan, for his part, chafed under the command of Miles and naval intelligence. Donovan looked for an alliance that would give his spies free rein. He soon turned his eyes northward to the other center of Japanese resistance, Mao's communists. Mao's troops had already built a reputation as fearless guerrillas. Little was known about Mao's intelligence operations, but they were rumored to be reliable. The fact that the communists were isolated geographically and militarily was not lost on William Donovan, who saw an opportunity for real independence. In December 1943, Donovan sent a discreet message to Mao in his headquarters in Yan'an, signaling that he might want to meet. Little did Donovan know that his OSS operation had already been penetrated by Mao's spies.
The deputy director had this romantic obsession with his secretary, and he could not do it in downtown Chongqing. And he sought the help of one of the guys who he knew who spoke English very well. So this guy arranged a serene house in a suburb so he could have some kind of dalliances with his secretary. And in return, he was very grateful to this person. And this person happened to be Yan Baohang, and the top spy of the Chinese Communists.
Unaware that the communist Yan Baohang had already infiltrated OSS operations, Donovan sent word to Mao of a possible alliance. Mao was intrigued. Overt American aid was possibly his best chance at gaining legitimacy and support. He sent word back. The Chinese Communist Party would be quite happy to become America's ally. Under Donovan's direction, a unique team of American spies and diplomats quietly prepared to travel north to meet Mao Zedong. It was 1944, and in China the Allies were not finding the support they so desperately needed. Despite millions of dollars and thousands of tons of arms and ammunition, Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist forces were unable to make any headway against the Japanese. American General Albert Wiedemeyer, head of the Army's headquarters in China, could only express disgust at the military state of America's supposed ally. He said, "China's army is ready for a general hospital rather than a general reserve. The disorganization and muddled planning of the Chinese is beyond comprehension." Part of the problem was that Chiang Kai-shek refused to use all his new Allied resources against the Japanese, preferring instead to save his best troops and equipment to fight against Mao once the war with Japan was over. In the nationalists' eyes, the real war was still against the communists.
In 1943 and early 1944, the military situation in China was so bleak, with the Chinese nationalist armies failing to fight effectively, squandering aid, squirreling it away for an expected civil war, that Roosevelt became intrigued by the advice of some embassy staffers that there was more than one horse to back in China. There was another horse, and that horse might be the Chinese Communist movement. With a little aid, with a little encouragement, they could be induced to fight the Japanese more effectively.
William Donovan, head of the OSS, had come to the same conclusion. He began to put together a secret task force. Its goals were to coordinate guerrilla missions, investigate the communist operations, train Chinese operatives, and relay all significant information back to Washington. Calling itself the Dixie Mission, the group began to make its way to Yan'an, Mao's communist stronghold in northwest China. The Dixie Mission consisted of 24 men. Some were OSS trainers and staff. The rest were members of the U.S. Foreign Service. Diplomats, not soldiers, most of them young, many of them fluent in Chinese. Their arrival in Yan'an was captured in this once top-secret OSS film. It was a diplomatic victory for the communists.
Mao was very receptive to the Dixie Mission. He gave them the nicest caves in Yan'an. People lived in caves carved out of sandstone. He invited them to dances. In fact, the half dozen or so American political officers in the Dixie Mission probably spent more time with Mao and his close aides than any other foreigners did in the 1930s, 40s, or 50s.
Colonel David Barrett arrived with the Dixie Mission in June 1944. He found a hardened group of guerrillas who were adept at conducting operations behind enemy lines. Soon, shipments of weapons and explosives once meant for the nationalists were rerouted to the communists in Yan'an. The communists found the OSS equally useful.
What the Chinese communists wanted from the OSS were three things: cash, with which to bribe the puppets for weapons. Secondly, the communists wanted arms, equipment. And thirdly, I think it's most importantly, that the Chinese communists wanted from the OSS an open military and intelligence cooperation. The openness of that would signal the American acquiescence of the political legitimacy of Chinese Communist government.
The leading member of the mission's diplomatic corps was John Service, who saw in Yan'an the future of free China.
Jack Service, as he was known to his friends, had been born in China. He was a missionary kid, He had superb Chinese, not just regular Mandarin Chinese, but also knew many dialects, and was one of those inquisitive, all-American heroes who was able to move through the back alleys of cities and villages and pick up immense amounts of information. He became convinced during the Dixie Mission that the communists were China's best hope.
The U.S. was already allied with the Soviet Union, but there was another precedent for supporting communist guerrillas, a very successful precedent in Yugoslavia. Under the suggestion of Winston Churchill, Allied support had been withdrawn from the corrupt regime of Serbian General Mihailović and given to a communist partisan leader, Marshal Tito. Tito and his guerrillas proved to be effective allies. Service informed the State Department that a similar situation existed in China, suggesting that a change in support from the corrupt nationalists to the hard-fighting communists might help the war effort. William Donovan agreed, sending his top agents from Yugoslavia to the communist stronghold in Yan'an. In late 1944, with the D-Day invasion successfully behind them and the German armies in retreat, the U.S. began focusing even more on the war with Japan. William Donovan began working with Mao's brilliant General Chu Dai on a daring plan designed to tip the entire balance of the war. A Normandy-style invasion of Japanese-occupied China on the beaches of Shandong province.
Shandong Peninsula was under the Japanese occupation, but the Chinese communists had several guerrilla bases there. And this would draw tremendous American troops and arms inflow with the Chinese communists.
At this point, the Dixie Mission was given a startling proposition. Mao Zedong and his second-in-command, Zhou Enlai, offered to go to Washington.
Mao asked the Dixie Mission to forward a message to President Roosevelt that he and Zhou Enlai would be willing to come either as private citizens or as Chinese representatives. They would go with or without publicity. They'd fly to Washington and hope to meet President Roosevelt and make a pitch.
In November 1944, John Service composed a communique for the Dixie Mission sent by coded telegram to Washington, D.C. It read, "The fact of our assistance to the communists would have profound and desirable political effects in China. There is no question that such a policy would be greatly welcomed by the vast majority of the Chinese people, and that it would raise American prestige. By such policy, which we consider realistically accepts the facts in China, we could expect to hold the communists to our side rather than throw them into the arms of Russia." Mao Zedong prepared for an historic meeting with the American president. But other forces were already plotting to prevent this alliance. It was a conspiracy of spies that, ironically, came not from Japan, but from within the Allied forces themselves. In 1945, Nazi Germany was collapsing under the Allied onslaught. In the Pacific, American forces continued their island-hopping campaign, slowly recapturing Japanese-conquered territory. But the Allies knew that it would be a long, hard fight. Japanese troops were fighting to the death instead of surrendering. Suicidal banzai charges were causing severe Allied losses, while entrenched Japanese troops were tying up Allied forces. A proposed plan to invade the Chinese mainland was intended to cut off supply lines to the Japanese and take some pressure off the brutal island-by-island campaign. China and Mao's guerrillas would provide a critical launching pad for a final assault on the Japanese home islands. Mao Zedong prepared to fly to Washington to present this concept to President Roosevelt. Members of the Dixie Mission felt an alliance with the Communists would have historic implications in Asia for the rest of the century. The mission sent a top-secret telegram to Washington urging a profound shift in America's support. It read, "We must not indefinitely underwrite a politically bankrupt regime. We must make a determined effort to capture politically the Chinese Communists, rather than allow them to go by default wholly to the Russians. If Chiang and the Communists are irreconcilable, then we shall have to decide which faction we're going to support. We must keep in mind this basic consideration. Power in China is on the verge of shifting from Chiang to the Communists." But the American efforts for a communist-supported invasion were soon sabotaged. Not by the Japanese, but by Dai Li's nationalist spies. Naval intelligence under Milton Miles saw Donovan's plan for a Chinese land invasion as another attempt to encroach on his turf. Miles and Dai Li agreed that their enemy was not just the Japanese, but the OSS and the Dixie Mission.
Anytime members of the Dixie Mission made proposals, tried to forward ideas advanced by Mao and Zhou for cooperative activities, the naval group people would not only forward to Washington these reports, but almost certainly were a back channel that forwarded these messages to Chiang Kai-shek and Dai Li. Chiang Kai-shek and Dai Li learned about it, and even before Roosevelt received the message, had sent a strong protest denouncing this proposal, ensuring its rejection by authorities in Washington.
Yet another opponent of the plan was the new ambassador to China, Patrick Hurley.
Patrick Hurley was one of the more ominous and ridiculous figures in American diplomatic history. He had been a Republican politician from Oklahoma. Hurley was looking for a foreign assignment. China was as far away from Washington as you could find, and Roosevelt, eager to in a sense rid himself of Hurley to a degree, while giving him a prestigious post, dispatched him as a representative to China.
Hurley had a passionate dislike of communism in any form. Chiang Kai-shek and Dai Li wined and dined their potential new ally, dazzling him with displays of the crack troops and new arms they had deliberately kept out of the war. Hurley became convinced that his new friend Chiang Kai-shek was China's only hope.
In the spring of 1945, one of the few remaining critics in the U.S. Embassy, a junior Foreign Service officer, wrote a memo mildly critical of Chinese nationalist policy. Patrick J. Hurley, the ambassador, called him into his office, had him sit in front of the desk. Hurley opened the desk drawer, pulled out a gun, put it in his face and said, "Change that report, or I'm going to shoot you." The man promptly changed the report, not surprisingly.
Patrick Hurley learned about the planned invasion of China from Dai Li's spies. He publicly denounced John Service and the Dixie Mission, saying their support for Mao and the Communists, even in wartime, was tantamount to treason. At the same time, Chiang Kai-shek protested the American support of Mao, even going so far as to threaten to make a separate peace with Japan. Under this kind of pressure, all official support for the invasion plan was dropped. Mao's trip to Washington was abandoned, and the members of the Dixie Mission were sent home in disgrace. Mao Zedong was no longer America's ally. In August 1945, the Japanese signed an unconditional surrender. The world rejoiced at the end of World War II. But in the mountains of northwest China, Mao Zedong knew that his war was far from over. The Civil War, placed on hold while China fought Japan, was about to be renewed. Mao's spies informed him that American guns and tanks were again being sent to Chiang Kai-shek's capital, and American planes were flying nationalist troops to strategic points throughout China. Mao's would-be American allies had turned against him. One of the last reporters in Yunnan found Mao to be surprisingly calm about this new and potentially devastating development. Mao confidently told the reporter, "If I can fight Japan with these few rusty rifles, I can fight America too." Billions of dollars in U.S. aid were sent to Chiang Kai-shek. Yet the nationalist forces collapsed before Mao's armies. Corruption and fraud had bankrupted the entire country. Many of Chiang's best troops defected to join the communists. Chiang Kai-shek fled mainland China in 1949 to join the final remnant of his army on the island of Taiwan. On October 1st, 1949, Mao Zedong declared the birth of the People's Republic of China. It was a China that was now violently anti-Western and anti-American. Within a year, Mao's soldiers would be shooting at American soldiers on the Korean Peninsula. In the aftermath of the communist victory, many Americans asked who lost China. The first culprits to be blamed were the members of the Dixie Mission. Senators like Joseph McCarthy claimed the Dixie Mission undermined Chiang's pro-Western nationalists, leading to a communist victory. This ended the diplomatic careers of most of the members of the Dixie Mission. At the height of the Red Scare of the 40s and 50s, John Service was even arrested for espionage. But members of the Dixie Mission were not the only suspects accused of losing China.
In 1949, the Republicans in opposition raised the charge, who lost China? They had their answer. It was Harry Truman, George Marshall, Dean Acheson, lily-livered Democrats who coddled communists. That seemed all the explanation that was necessary. Other Americans pointed out China was never ours to lose. I don't think anyone lost China. I think the Chinese had to find their own way. But I think the whole notion that anyone or any American group lost China is the height of arrogance, as if the most populous country in the world was a puppet on our string.
Nobody lost China. The communists won a victory, the nationalists lost the war, and that dispute remains unresolved to this day.
The fate of those who served in China in World War II was often bitter. John Service was cleared of all espionage charges, but he never again held a diplomatic post. Captain Milton Miles suffered a nervous breakdown in Chongqing near the end of the war and was sent home, effectively ending Naval Group China. Dai Li died in a mysterious plane crash in 1946, just before the Chinese Civil War resumed. Persistent rumors said the accident was actually an assassination engineered by the communists. Chiang Kai-shek led the nationalist government in Taiwan until his death in 1975, insisting to the end that he alone was the rightful leader of China. Mao Zedong led the People's Republic from 1949 to his death in 1976. In 1972, Mao officially welcomed Richard Nixon to China, re-establishing ties with the West for the first time since the communist nation's founding. 3 decades after his first attempt, Mao Zedong finally met the American president. The Chinese Civil War is still not over. Missiles and threats continue to fly over the Strait of Taiwan more than half a century after the beginning of Mao and Chiang's duel for China. With roots in the Second World War, it's a stalemate that lasts to this day. A stalemate kept in place by time, lost opportunities, and the legacy of Mao's secrets.